I can tell you that their cells extend from Latin America, Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina, Venezuela, Mexico, all the way to West Africa, from Sierra Leone all the way to Togo, Benin, and Mauritius in East Africa, as well as in Eastern Europe. I mean, goodness, I mean, they have cells all over the place. And remember, 1992, Buenos Aires, again, 1994, also Buenos Aires. These were Hezbollah attacks. Also, there has been a foiled bomb attack in London by Hezbollah just about 2.5 years ago.
Islamic State and Al-Qaeda are on the rise again, according to MI5's Director General, who says that mass murder plots by them are what keeps them up at night. Ken McCallum said 43 late-stage terrorist attacks had been disrupted since 2017, and that renewed conflict in the Middle East could drive new terror attacks in the UK. Aimen Dean is a former member of Al-Qaeda turned Mi6 agent who worked 8 years undercover for British intelligence inside the terror groups. He's now co-host of the podcast. Mr. Dean, welcome to the programme. MI5 says one of the biggest terrorist threats to the UK right now are Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. Now, we know they've been resurgent in Afghanistan and through that to the African Sahel, but why are they now a threat to Britain too?
The problem with terrorism that it is cyclical. So we always see this coming and going in cycles, just like the moon. I mean, basically we start with the new moon and then we end up with the full one. So for example, with Afghanistan, started in the 1980s and 90s, and then Bosnia in the 1990s, then the Caucasus, and then of course the Iraq War and the 9/11 attacks. So every now and then there is some conflict where that causes the rise of the tide of terrorism globally, such as Syria, and of course, now what's happening basically in the Palestine-Israel conflict.
So what's happening in the Middle East at the moment, as in previous events in that part of the world, it acts like a recruiting sergeant for the terrorist groups?
Yes, indeed. I mean, whenever there is a conflict that is raging, and especially in particular, any conflict that is involving Israel somehow, the narrative immediately jumps that this is a West versus East and Islam versus others narrative, and immediately it becomes used and abused by extremists in order to recruit people to their cause, to say that, look, if you don't do something, for the sake of the Palestinians, then you are part of the problem rather than the solution. And of course, since the narrative being that the Europeans and the Americans are supporting the Israelis in this campaign, then they are as guilty as the Israelis themselves, which of course is a twisted narrative, but nonetheless, it is effective in recruiting impressionable young people who just can't tell the difference.
Is it likely that Al-Qaeda and Islamic State, all their offshoots, because they have many, is it likely that they have cells already active in Britain again?
Without a doubt. I mean, if you remember, MI5
Without
used to talk about, yes, MI5 used to talk about, just in 2017, they used to talk about 3,000 people of interest. Just in the UK alone. And of course, we're talking about 2017. Can you imagine since then what happened? And of course, since October 7th, there are, and we are talking only about Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Can you imagine, if Hezbollah, want to activate their global cells, that will multiply the problem at least twofolds.
So let me just check there. You said, because we always think of Hezbollah in terms of Lebanon and Beirut, and of course in southern Lebanon as well, as a proxy for Iran with all the rockets it has. Are you saying that Hezbollah also has an international terrorist network?
I worked as a financial intelligence investigator for counterterrorism finance for many years. And I can tell you that their cells extend from Latin America, Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina, Venezuela, Mexico, all the way to West Africa, from Sierra Leone all the way to Togo, Benin, and Mauritius in East Africa, as well as in Eastern Europe. I mean, goodness, I mean, they have cells all over the place. And remember, 1992, Buenos Aires, again, 1994, also Buenos Aires. These were Hezbollah attacks. also there has been a foiled bomb attack in London by Hezbollah just about 2.5 years ago. And in addition to that, they tried to attack Israeli tourists in Azerbaijan and in Bulgaria. The attempts by Hezbollah to target Israelis, been very well, documented over the years, and they have cells all over the, known world almost.
And with these Hezbollah cells across the world, its international arm, am I right in thinking that these would tend only to be activated with Iran giving the go-ahead, that Iran would have to be complicit and be behind what they then get up to?
Exactly, especially now that Hezbollah is against a corner in Lebanon and feeling desperate, while at the same time the Iranians are trying their best in order to protect the last stages of their nuclear program. They might as well activate, few cells just to send a warning message to the West that, look, if you try to harm our nuclear program, then of course the retaliation could be devastating in terms of terrorism on American and British and French streets.
You spent years, both overt and then covert, with young jihadis in Al-Qaeda. And you must have got to know them, what made them tick, why it was they had been motivated to become what they became. Tell us a bit about that. What was it like, and what were you dealing with there? What was motivating them?
There are several factors that motivate them. I mean, first of all, there is unfortunately, we don't focus on it so much, but there is an eschatological element to it. Prophecies, people recruiting them by saying, look, this is the end of times. It's like a cult. You have to join us because we are now approaching the epic battles of the end of time that's been foretold in the scriptures. And of course, they are twisted in order to present themselves as the instruments of God's plans for the end of days and to bring a caliphate forward. Also, the need for empowerment and also the false sense of pan-Islamic solidarity that only existed more than 1,300 years ago, but no longer existed after that. And in trying to demolish, the model of the nation state and replace it with a model of a, far-fetched imperial caliphate dream.
The head of MI5 said that he had, quote, one hell of a job on his hands. And that's understandable he could say that. And we know we don't underestimate how difficult it is. But does British intelligence, our security forces, our agents, people as you were once, and so are we up to it? Are we doing as best as we can in these difficult circumstances?
I could say yes. My experience working for the UK intelligence and security services, I mean, I met some of the most capable, learned and professional people I could, ever meet. And I would say that, yes, they are not as well funded and, as well manned like the Americans in terms of numbers, but I would say that their professionalism, their understanding of the core problem is unmatched and unparalleled.
Well, that's good to hear, Aimen Dean. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and you can hear more from Mr. Dean on his podcast, Conflicted.